All right. Uh, all right. Let's see if this works on Wi-Fi. This might not work, but it's worth trying. All right. Hey everyone, Antslayer here. Uh, Doing a quick remote patch review. I have to be a little quiet, so I apologize for that. Um, but 0.28 came out, and I definitely wanted to talk about it. So, yeah, we are going to try to stream this on Wi-Fi. Let's hope it works. But anyhow, um, yeah, 0.28. Uh, so first off, I'd like to say thank you for the devs for listening and taking some advice. I can definitely see that some of the stuff I've been writing about has been inspired here, and you're I definitely appreciate that. There's definitely some good changes. There's a few mid changes, and we'll talk about that. But like for the most part, like very very solid and exciting patch. So yeah, there's other than we'll talk about the powers, but other than some of the nuance behind that, like I've read through this and I've been thinking about this all day, and I have to say that the the majority of changes here are pretty exciting and definitely inspired by a lot of the community feedback and stuff. So definitely appreciate that. Um, so that said, I don't have too much time, so let's just jump right into what I've been thinking about all day. Um, so powers, and I'm gonna cover the powers and the HP buff together. Um, uh, Actually, we're gonna cover the balance changes and the power buff altogether because I think they kind of all go together. Um, so yeah, powers now grant 2 armor whenever they're played. Uh, all powers across the game, both allies and enemies, um, and all bosses got increased HP. I did a quick random run, and the Spike Back got like a 25% HP increase, so it seems like a fairly sizable HP increase. This is not some paltry little thing. Uh, this was a definite notable HP increase on the boss's side. And then the combat difficulty has been slightly rebalanced. Slightly up the difficulty for non-boss encounters. From what I can tell, just running into stuff, it doesn't seem like any of the enemy types actually changed. It just seems like the game scales a little faster. Um, I haven't really done too much in-depth analysis. I just have ran around the world a little bit. But yeah, which is so the power change. So before we discuss in the context of the boss HP and scaling ramp, like this. So I've been talking about that. Like we definitely need more ability to defend powers. That a lot of powers in the game are just not really playable because they just get stripped instantly. Especially a lot of the one-off support powers you really can't play. You basically have to consider them one-turn buffs because they're just going to get hit by a lightning bolt, or an archer is going to shoot you, or someone's going to run in and swipe you, and you're just going to use this. Yeah, I'm dropping frames, so this will probably just end up being a video, but that's okay. Um, we'll continue anyway. So, with all that said, this does accomplish that to a degree. It's not an over sweeping defensive. Um, uh, it's an over sweeping defense of powers. From the player's perspective, you'll basically be able to take one hit without losing your powers if you just use one to start off on the first turn you play it. If you get hit by 2 hits from pretty much anything, that's pretty much going to equate to the about 6 damage you need to lose the power. But one stray hit will not drop it. And then if you add some armor continuously, you can probably stay ahead of the curve for a few levels. So from the player's perspective, this is not some type of like long-term power defense. This is definitely very short-term, and what that kind of means is that um, a few things. This First off, this heavily affects the reliability of getting your defensive powers online and stable, right? This is going to guarantee that like your abjuration when you play it stays in play. When your protector is played, it stays in play. When your shield wall is played, it stays in play. When your defensive stance is played, it stays in play. It's going to increase the stability of those cards, first and foremost. It'll also help a lot with sequencing. I mentioned in my scaling review that stuff like evocation is really awkward because like against in the necromancer fight you want evocation in your AoE up, but there's sometimes like you actually get penalized for drawing evocation early because you have to play it if you want to get your good card draw to get your AoE, but playing it means you very often just lose your you lose it. And now that's not really going to be the case, right? If you draw evocation early, you're going to be happy pretty much no matter what. And so that's going to make that more stable. The other benefit of this is that this is going to benefit fast powers a lot. As I said before, in the end game, it used to be that you can really only count as like powers, like offensive powers, as statuses that would only last one turn. And now this kind of says that it'll guarantee last 2 turns. And as I did talk with my stats analysis, like the difference between 1 and 2 turns is actually like triple, because you have like if you have like invest like 3 or 4 cards to get a status in play, you have only a small amount of cards left to play with to actually take use of that. Whereas if you get to another turn, you have your entire sweep of your cards to take use of it. So this is a pretty big deal for like tempo-y powers, like your offensive powers that do things quickly. This will definitely help make them significantly more viable. Stuff like astral projectiles, stuff like calculations, which is one we're going to talk about later. A lot of in the context of melee, like the offensive powers, like offensive stance and battle stance, in the specific context of melee, where you might be equipping them to get like one particular good turn, it will help a lot. But where this is not going to help pretty much at all is for value powers. These are powers that heavily involve it's stuff like your prepares, the warlords, AoE, like willpower reduction, like stuff like that is stuff that like accumulates benefit over time, is not really going to benefit from this. You're not going to be able to recover that value. Like meditation, you're not going to be able to. And so it's the gradual recuperation of benefit powers are not really going to do it. It's probably not going to help like overload builds very much. It's not going to. I mean, it's like going to be net neutral for overload builds. It's not going to help like very slow scaling builds. From the player's perspective, like this makes current builds more reliable and adds a little bit of viability to the I'm gonna say like off power, like kind of supporty stuff. It's not going to in addition with some of the other changes, such as the force field buff, which is probably actually my most exciting buff out of all of these, believe it or not. On top of that, like the kind of like tempo support powers are now going to be probably more viable, but this does not only affect players. This is a very double-edged sword, and the reason why it's a double-edged sword is obvious because it also affects enemies. and uh, many, many, many enemies have powers. Um, and so I kind of did a mental inventory of like, okay, this is the benefits for players. It like helps streamline and solidify mainline builds and helps branch a little bit, explore some new spaces, which is great. Exploring new spaces is great. But I don't actually think in the long run it's going to actually help us explore new spaces because the benefit to the enemies is absolutely massive for this patch. Absolutely massive. So, first off, you have the bosses. So, the bosses, I don't think this change actually impacts as much. Um, so, the I'm gonna start from the high end and go back. The dragon and um, the planar is actually probably the biggest buff for this, because the planar has abjuration, and there's a very real chance, like, if the planar plays abjuration plus another power, like getting an extra 4 armor could actually be hard to deal with in the early stages of the fight. Like if you're playing semi-infinite rat or like super high scaling acid builds, then it's like you can probably deal with it. But like in the beginning of that fight, there's a very good chance that like evocation stays online and abjuration stays online, and you could be eating a lot of fireball damage and a lot of AoE damage, and having a hard time. Like it's very possible the planar can snowball those early turns into a very quick, decisive destruction of your team. Um, and so that's kind of scary. That's very scary. It's there's no the planar has such a diverse kit between ranged and like heavy melee and like purging and stuff that it's you just kind of beat the planar with raw power, right? Like the key to beating the planar is just to have like a semi-infinite abjuration build that stacks like 10 armor a turn and get hits for like 40 a turn, and you just hit like a truck and hope you don't lose the RNG. Um, that's how I've won pretty much all of my high cat runs. Is with either obscene amounts of acid or just a rat semi-infinite with resourceful. Um, and so yeah, there's not too many tools the player like immobilize helps a little bit, but there's not too many tools the players have to like burst has been severely limited in this game, and there's not too many tools that you can use to really like get through like 12 armor and um 12 armor and like I don't know 12 armor and 12 HP worth of powers in a turn, which is what's going to happen with this in the planar case. And so yeah, there's a very real chance that if you don't get your semi-infinite online and it's not online and it's not able, if it's either not online or unable to do the damage type on the turn that the planar plays the powers, there's a really like it's already hard to deal with all those powers, but now it's just going to be even harder slash impossible for like your off carries or like your clash on your warrior or something. It's going to make it like near impossible to deal with that, and so it's going to make the planar fight a lot more risky and a lot more rolly, um, which I'm not a super big fan of. Uh, so yeah, that's the dragon. This doesn't really matter too much. The dragon just gets offensive stance, and the dragon you really don't care about how much armor he has. Like it's nice to take offensive stance offline, but when we're playing Cat 10, all the bosses have a free offensive stance. Like if the dragon's hitting you, you're dying. It's just like like taking +3 damage from having offensive stance sometimes online. Like it's just not going to matter very much. Um, so yeah, the dragon doesn't matter too much. The worm doesn't matter at all with this. The lich, this does buff the lich a lot, but the lich was just recently nerfed, and I actually kind of fine with the lich getting some extra power defense because the lich has turned into like this slow grindy fight. Um, the lich is probably a little too easy right now with the fact that she doesn't have fireball. Um, And so I'm kind of fine with the Lich getting like, okay, you can defend your powers a little bit more. It's unlike the Planar, like the Lich can't use the powers as well. Like has very limited things to use evocation with, and so yeah, it's like okay, it's like that's all right. The Necromancer, he has one power, but it is a scary power. This will make it a little bit harder. Um, yeah, the this will make basically between the increased consistencies with the evocation and stuff and the slightly scarier nature of Summoner, basically the power change will make it so that Necromancer. Basically, if you have a good build for the Necromancer fight, you're gonna win more consistently. If you have a bad build, you're gonna lose more consistently. It just polarizes it more. Um, so like overall, the Necromancer fight like statistically hasn't changed very much in terms of like proportion of builds that can take it on and not. Um, but like the ability for you to clutch out a win against the Necromancer is definitely reduced. Um, and then the Bandit Lord, uh, this is going to be a pain for trying to burst the Bandit Lord if he plays a power. Because like there are some times where like you risk going a Clash build to like try to one shot the Bandit Lord early, and this is going to make it a bit harder to do that because the Clash one shot builds are like very precise about you killing it in one turn, um, and like yeah, chain immolate stuff. So overall against the bosses, um, the power changes probably they leave they essentially polarize a lot of the bosses, and this is also coupled with the fact that like they got a sizable HP nerf, like a lot of HP. Um, so yeah, it's pretty rough. Basically, the like from the boss perspective, this this change kind of polarizes builds a lot, right? Like buffing the boss HP is not going to make your semi infinite builds like or like your high damage high rolly builds like any worse. Like they're still going to like if you chain lock the dragon, you're going to be able to kill him at whatever HP. If you get 20 acid on something, you're going to kill it at whatever HP. Um getting like the rat with like 8 draw pieces and 2 resourcefuls, like you're going to be able to kill it at whatever HP. A 20% HP buff doesn't really matter. The the yeah, one moment. Sorry if quality is bad. I'm streaming. Yeah. But yeah. Yeah. What was I gonna say? But yeah, the where the HP buff. So like the HP buff doesn't actually matter when you're doing well and you have a mainstream build. Where it matters is when you don't have a mainstream build and you're trying to kill the Lich with like a triple Emulate build, or you're trying to like one shot the Bandit Lord with Clash, or you're trying to like eke out these like really difficult fights. Um, like these changes basically like polarize the fights in my mind, um, and like the kind of like fringe builds like the things where we talk about like tempo powers and like using stuff like astral projectiles, right? Like yes, they get buffed against the bosses, but also like the type of things where you're trying to like the bosses also got extra defense against tempo stuff, and so it kind of negates itself out. Um, so like in my mind, like there's no really new like none of the builds changed their status at all in terms of the bosses. Um, they just because they just everything got much more polarized, right? Like consistent good builds got more consistent, bad builds got more consistently at being bad, um, and so and like the things that like this power change is in theory supposed to help are like directly countered by how it helps on the enemy side. And then this goes to the buffs to um, the non boss characters with powers. Um, what comes to mind is specifically archers and then the hybrids. Uh, this is also going to further polarize archer fights tremendously because before it used to be that if archers, all three archers in the game have powers that amp their damage. It used to be that if they put powers into play, there's a very low chance that they're going to actually defend that turn, so you had a chance to kill them. Um, Now, if they put powers in play, it's very unlikely you're going to be able to burst any of the archers. Um, and in the case of the elven archers, there's a very low chance you're going to be able to get Deadeye off, which means all the archer fights are really like it's either you kill them turn one or you're going to take a bajillion damage, and like it just makes the archer fights much more high rolly. Like it's like, does your team have like the amount of burst in their deck to consistently do this? If they do, it doesn't matter. If they don't, you're going to get destroyed. Um, and then the same is kind of true with the hybrids. Like if you have the, yeah, yeah. As I say, yeah, the hybrid brutes, like it's not going to change the hybrid brutes too much because typically you don't engage the hybrid brutes on the turns they play their powers. But like Cat 9 already makes the hybrid brutes like really difficult to deal with. And them getting like a random extra HP is going to make them even harder. And so, yeah, kind of once again, like if you're high rolling your builds, you're going to be able to deal with these things more. But if you're not, like the standard fights are going to become much more brutal because of this power change. Um, and on top of that, the fights are scaling faster now because that seems to be what the readjustment changes. And so, like, you're gonna have to get ahead of the curve a lot earlier, which means you're just gonna have to like high roll. Like I don't know. This power change, it just makes the power change plus the HP changes just seems to make high rolling, and getting like like bread and butter builds like a must, and that's probably not going to be too fun. Like I like the concept of having better power defense, but the reality is that like the things that make better power defense good are like directly countered by like the double-edged nature of this. Um, like I mean, I've said it before. Like I'm not a huge fan of like giving bosses defensive stuff. I'd rather you nerf HP and give them unique offensive options, because it means that like low damage builds can become interesting, right? And like finite expression builds, like where like you have heroics that like try to carry you through fights, like chain immolate builds actually become interesting, and like melee based heroic builds actually become interesting. But when you just like I'd be much more interested like if you like increase the defensive powers of the players and then like gave the bosses like each a heroic, right? Like if you gave the necromancer, like if you increase the defensive power of the players but then gave the necromancer insight, right? All of a sudden it's like it's a very sharp interesting fight. You having low damage could be compensated by the fact of you being able to brute defense the like one mega turn where like he just bombards you with like 8 billion damage. Like it's like it's like you can, it doesn't immediately negate your builds if you do something interesting like that. But when you just like buff HP and buff defensive powers of bosses too, it's like it makes like finite expression stuff really difficult to pull off. Um, and so, yeah, I am like I like the intent of this change, but I think in effect it's going to just make the game a little more, yeah. Um, so yeah, that's a bit unfortunate. That being said, the rest of the patch looks very interesting, and very exciting. So, the summon update. So basically, they took my recommendation for at least the willpower cost of summons directly, eliminated the scaling, and changed the necromancer. This this is good. Things are still going to be a little wonky because the item distribution and how they can fall on characters is weird. Like, it's very difficult to get summoner and summons on the same character still because, like, the way Dark Vessel is working and, like, um, distribution of slots. But at the very least, this is a a very good step at trying to get like summon builds actually viable at high levels. I It's going to mean that you can actually get them out, and that's the first step. As a note, this also is a slight nerf to the Necromancer because it means his first summon comes out one willpower slower, which is good because I think the Necromancer fight was made a little more, is one of the fights that was made a bit more polarized by the power update. Like definitely, and so I'm a bit fan of that. But yeah, this, I don't know if on its own it's going to mean summons are good, but it means you can actually try, right? It means you can actually like try to get summoner to be reasonable. It means you can actually probably get a summon to stick in later game fights. It means that signal shot's probably going to be fine. So yeah, I'm chill with this change. Yeah, this is going to help Hunter a lot. If you're going to try to go signal shot builds, um, it's probably still not going to be viable end game to go summons, but it might become viable mid game. It might become viable up to the point of like the second boss instead of just the first. Like it'll probably make it viable through Act 2, which it'll just help summons a lot. I do appreciate the preemptive nerf to Warlord, assuming this can bring summon abuse, like nerfing this is being good and mindful about your the state of the meta and impact of dynamics, and be like, okay, we should probably make sure that like the really cheesy stuff can't be abused. So I do appreciate the Warlord alterations to march and show the way, because I know historically those have been problematic. Yeah, well, I'll definitely be playing around with summons a lot more, especially with this beautiful change right here. Oh my gosh, this is by far the best change in the patch. Force field getting reduced to 1 willpower. We don't have very many support cards, but now we have a good one, and it shows up on a lot of stuff. It shows up on bracers, it shows up on tomes, it shows up on staffs. Like, all those items just became notably viable for non-core characters, and it's going to help summon builds a lot. It's like one of the big things is that you can't defend your summons, and now this is going to help that a lot. It's going to help a lot of these putting powers off of your core character. It's going to just help against AoE in general. It's going to help you survive a lot. Like, a lot of the brutality that's introduced in this patch because of the double-edged nature of powers can probably be like assuaged a bit by this force field change. This is a huge change. It's also going to make Astral Tome, which was like borderline good, like you crafted it sometimes, to like a really solid support item. It's gonna make Dragon Wing bracers very solid. It's going to make like support Elementalist actually a thing. This inadvertently buffs Stone Barrier now, especially if you roll a Dragon Wings bracer. This is just a very interesting change, and it's going to open up a lot of different build paths, which are going to be necessary because this game just got a lot harder. Like I can't. I can't express enough like how much like I talked about before how the enemies scale quadratically, and speeding up that time and also making archers harder to kill is just like we need tools, and this was a great tool. So I am I am I'm happy about the force field change. This was needed. This was this opens up a lot of different stuff you can do with characters, especially with support elemental. Unfortunately, there's not many tomb slots on a lot of other characters, um, but those with tome slots, those with tome and slot and staff slots, because you can still get a force staff, right? You can get a force staff and hone it off. You can have two force fields. Um, yeah, characters with tome and there's also bracers that. What bracers? Let me pull up what I forget. I know Dragonwing bracers gives it, and I know there's another bracers that give it. I forget if there's any non-purple ones that give. Um, does this have everything? No, this doesn't. Throw an elementalist in there. So for force fields, we got. Okay, we don't have any. We only have Dragonwing bracers for the force field, though we do have Elven bracers. I know staff. We have Astral Conduit. Is that it? Really? No, we have a force staff. Yeah. So yeah, we have force staff. Tomes obviously have the common, and then a bunch of other ones. Equipment, I forget if we have a force field. I don't think we do. Totems don't have a force field. It's mostly staffs and tomes, which is fine. They're both very cheap and very doable. There's no shield with a force field, I believe. There might be a robe with one? Yeah, okay, Enchanted Robe also has one. Yeah, so if you want to go Enchanted Robe, Support Robe, if you like happen to find this, you can. So yeah. Yeah, there's definitely... Massing force fields is definitely a thing right now, especially if you have Dragonwing bracers. So that's a pretty huge deal. Definitely appreciate that. Yeah, that's probably one of the saving graces of this patch. So yeah, Run. So I'm glad the devs realized Run is a bad card, because it is. This is not really increasing to 5 movement helps a teeny bit, but unfortunately doesn't help a ton. And the reason why it doesn't help a ton is because after around 3 movement, you get severe diminishing returns because the map is only so big. And a lot of the restrictions to movement happen because of terrain and enemy, particularly enemy zone of effect, like the 1-tile zone around them. And so it's very difficult to make use of 5 movement. Basically, this is only useful in the beginning of the fight where you're like trying to go from your opponent, like from starting position all the way up to an archer, is basically the use of this. It can also be used a bit for running away, but typically like 4 is the max you can get distance from an opponent in the center of the field anyway. So yeah, this card isn't really made, like, it's like negligibly better. Yeah, the problem with mobility cards is they're kind of like half a card, and like you need to very aggressively set them to justify them as an item, as a non-starter card, right? Like you can keep advances because like advances don't have to beat other cards, they just have to beat the other starter cards, which is not that high of a feat. But item cards that you're adding to your deck has to be like better than the top 30% of your deck. Yeah, so like you can't have like basically an advance plus, it's just not acceptable. If you wanted to make a pure movement card good, what I'd recommend doing is doing something like Run is move 3 and then activate your character. Give them like a 2-piece movement so that they can like use it to like navigate around zones of effect, or like move in and disengage with one willpower or one card. Stuff like that I think would like make Run actually interesting as like a pure movement card. But as is like this is basically, it's better than the old Run, but it's like not by much, and it's still not going to. I'm still gonna hone it off. So, but yeah, I'm glad you guys recognize this as a weak card. Iron Skin. I don't think Iron Skin was broken. My guess is this is to help against the Basilisk fight now that they get 2 extra free armor. Because it's going to be hard to peel that off. So I can respect this change. It makes sense because the extra free armor you get scales better with defensive powers, and so this is just prudent. I can appreciate it. I don't think it was maybe necessary, but it's a good prudent change. I like philosophically I approve of this. Seethe. This is a nice little buff to Seethe. Slight quality of life improvement, but also like you're not going to strip this power down to the bone and overdraw. So it's nice. Yeah, Seethe's an okay card. This doesn't change it fundamentally, but it's still nice. So acid coating. So I'm going to address acid coating calculations. Oh no, never mind. This is different. All right. Acid coating. Reduced cost to 1 from 3. This was a very much needed change. Acid coating was basically just way too slow. It was slow on slow on slow. And it basically just got stripped every time, or you never got to use it. So this is a very super welcome change. This on top of the acid fog change, I think is the final step to make it so that like acid items are a staple. Like you find an acid item and it's like finding a protector shield, or it's like finding a fireball staff. It's like this is something that like you can use, and like if you have a character that can use it decently, you're going to be able to like bring this in, and it's going to it's not broken because like acid does a very specific thing, right? It helps scale your damage in long fights, and that's a very particular thing, but like all the acid cards do it solidly now, and we have a critical mass of acid that you can, if you find the cards to do it, you can definitely go for it. And if you're trying to build acid builds, then like it helps a lot. This is also helping a lot with Rat, and like characters that are trying to apply acid on hit instead of using like elementalist or elemental staff stuff. So yeah, this is a absolutely welcome change. Very glad to see this. Yeah, this rounds out the acid suite very nicely on top of the acid fog, which we'll talk about soon. Resilience kind of gets the Iron Skin change in the fact that, so basically the resilience is armor doesn't change, but you get 6 defense. This is pretty huge. Resilience was a great card to begin with, and this essentially is just like a nice little buff to it. Like this is gonna be a very consistent card at defending you. And yeah, I can appreciate that. Like, I guess I don't think it necessarily needed a buff, but it got one. It's cool. I'll take it. I need it. So yeah. Dire Bat. This is justified. I mean, I'm sad because the 4 HP change was definitely more impactful than the cost reduction. But like I can definitely see why spamming 1 willpower 4 HP bats could be pretty toxic. And truth be told, with the force field change, there's a very good chance that you can consistently get your bats to have that 4 HP if you like combo things intelligently. And so yeah, I'm fine with this change. This is a deserved nerf. I don't think the card was too weak in the old state, but I definitely think it could be too strong in the new state. So, like, yeah, agree with this 100%. Good nerf, preemptively. Show the way. Update effect to move 3, then activate all friendly heroes. So, okay, this is just to prevent summon G's. Still going to be a fine ability. It's just not going to have the cheesy application. Yeah, fine power. Yeah. In non-cheese builds, this doesn't really change this at all, or just minorly nerfs it. And I'm still probably not going to play Warlord, but of the good cards in Warlord, this doesn't change the status of it for me. So, yeah. This is just prudent. I agree with this change in general. It's just prudent based on the summon stuff. Attack. Updated effect to all friendly heroes draw a melee attack card from their deck, and then all. This is still very weird power. Most of your characters don't want melee attacks, so like aside from like early game beatdowns, this doesn't do anything. Yeah. This card's still bad. I don't care. Back to back. Reduced cost to 0 for month. Good. I'm glad I kind of got the force field treatment. I mean, Warlord still doesn't have enough defense cards to make him a reliable defender. So yeah, it's nice. I definitely like it. I definitely think it's potentially useful, but I'm still like it's like the Warlord doesn't have the Warlord needs like another couple defense support defense cards to like justify you making him like a defense staple. This is just gonna make it nice. This is not gonna make it the value of back to back wasn't in the raw power of back to back. It was in like the fact that it's just not a critical mass. No, to be fair, this is now a 0 defend 4 on self, right? There's something to be said that's definitely something to look at. But yeah, you still have to high roll these, right? Like, you still have to high roll these. I still probably would rather have a protect in a lot of situations. Yeah. Like, I don't know, the Warlord needs one more defensive card before I can be like, okay, this is a defensive class. Because like he's kind of gypped in the fact that like he can't make use of defensive stance as well. He doesn't have resilience, or measured blow or bulwark. Like he just doesn't have those nice. Like he doesn't have neither good early game defense tools nor later game scaling defense tools, and he's not as good with protector as the warrior is. So it's like. I mean, this is nice, but I don't think it's. I don't know. If maybe if I can stack some force fields on the Warlord, I might consider the Warlord a little more. Because the Warlord does have a staff slot. I forget what the Warlord has in his final slot though. Let me take a look. See. The Warlord has a tome. Okay, so I don't know. Maybe you run staff tome with force fields. I forget if force fields count towards. They should count towards a protector. So maybe you can do some stuff with force staffs and a force field tome with Warlord as your main defensive stuff. I might try that out a little bit with back-to-backs. I still like to see another defense card on the Warlord, though, to consider that. He just doesn't quite have enough. But this, I mean, back to back is now a very strong card. There's like no doubt. Like zero mana defend 4 is good to begin with. Zero mana defend 4 with the upside of potentially defending a nearby ally is like great. So, like this, I mean, back to back is insanely good now. Like I don't want to understate that how good back to back is. It's just that the Warlord doesn't have a lot in his kit to support it. So if he can support it, it's because he's stacking force fields. So I may try it. Yeah. Opening Strike. I believe this is a buff, right? If I recall Opening Strike correctly. You typically go Opening Strike for the... Or are we... It's not Inspiring Strike. Not other friendly characters draw a card. Oh, that's a pretty big buff. Yeah, 1 willpower for 1 fewer attack, but for a high... So that means this card is willpower neutral now. And it's kind of like a coordinate, that in terms of it funneling willpower onto allies. Now, of course, you'd have to get into melee range to use this, right? But it's... Yeah. I could see that. I could see this card being something. I can definitely see this card being something. It's not great.